My phone buzzed and I almost spat out my coffee. Did the US Treasury just flirt with XRP? And yeah, you heard that right. The government bond market's first crush might be a crypto coin. So here's the wild story that I stumbled into scrolling through X on a sleepy Tuesday. You know the usual routine, right? Check overnight charts, doom scroll for a little bit, promise yourself that you're going to hit the gym, then bam, right? 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗓 from 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 drops a thread that stops my thumb cold. The guy's suggestion? Forget printing plain old treasury bills. How about Uncle Sam issues IOUs backed by XRP instead? Now suddenly I'm picturing Janet Yellen in a hoodie, slapping QR codes on $100 bills like it's Comic-Con for bond nerds. Now, before you roll your eyes and mumble, bro, you've lost it, let's unpack why this isn't pure science fiction, right? Treasury bonds are basically the US government's favorite credit card. It's safe, it's boring, it pays a coupon, and good night, right? Now, 𝗕𝗀𝗪's twist is that the government still kind of borrows money, still promises interest, say 2% a year, but people would buy XRP from the treasury itself. So lock it up for a set term and collect their coupon in either dollars or fresh XRP. Now, at maturity, you redeem the principal again in XRP or USD, just like cashing in a war bond that your grandma kept in a shoebox. The very idea sounds slick, right? Blockchain settlement, instant auditability, no mystery about who owns what, right? Just imagine, right, a transparent bond ledger the size of a postage stamp living on every phone in the world. Forget your T2 clearing, this is T plus, blink and you miss it. Right? The government issues, the chain records, and a kid in 𝗕𝗫𝗪𝗪 can check the treasury wallets in real time while riding the bus. It's kind of poetic. But, and you knew there would be a but, crypto markets, they swing harder than my mood after my third espresso. Right? XRP has had days where it's up 12% before lunch and down 8% by dinner, right? Traditional fixed income folks break out in hives at that kind of turbulence. For a bond buyer, stability is the whole point, right? You're trading thrill rides for snooze-worthy predictability. So to make an XRP bond palatable, the price swings would need to chill, big time. Maybe we would anchor it with a stablecoin style reserve or something or some kind of pegging mechanism that smooths out all of the spikes. Then there's the regulatory funhouse. Right now, the SEC kind of treats many coins like weird digital cousins it barely kind of tolerates at Thanksgiving dinner, right? Bitcoin's the favorite child, right? Several states even label it as, qualified reserve asset. New Hampshire went as far as to kind of green light putting crypto in their treasury, but only if the asset has at least a $500 billion market cap. So guess what? Bitcoin struts over that bar. XRP? Not yet. So Washington would need fresh rule books, right? And those don't just fall from the sky. They get negotiated, lobbied, argued, and occasionally tossed onto some intern's overdue reading list. So let me tell you, regulation is a lot like grandma's lasagna, right? Everybody swears that there's an original recipe. Everyone's terrified to change a single ingredient, right? Just imagine Congress trying to swap dollars for digital tokens in bond law. You can cue the hearings with charts, consultants, and senators squinting at the word blockchain like it's, holographics. Now, we'd need fearless policymakers and maybe a crisis to kind of light a fire, right? Even 𝗕𝗪𝗪𝗪 admits Something would have to fundamentally collapse in the current bond market before people would ditch the trusty old treasury notes. So think back to 2008, right? You had the Lehman crashed, banks quaked, and suddenly phrases like credit default swap became water cooler talk. Now, a debt crisis of that scale could make the radical seem rational at record time. And meanwhile, other nations are already toying with token-based sovereign debt. Take El Salvador working on its famous volcano bonds, baking Bitcoin exposure into national paper. Now, across the pond, tiny jurisdictions are slicing real-world assets, property titles, fine art, wine barrels into blockchain tokens that you can buy from your couch. So we're not totally alone in this speculative sandbox. And Bitcoin itself? Oh, it's not shy about masquerading its way into bond chatter. At the recent Bitcoin for America summit, New Market Capital's CEO, Andrew, pitched a $2 trillion bond program with a twist. Allocate 10% of each issuance straight into Bitcoin. Offer a 1% coupon, way below the 4.5% treasuries pay today, and he claims that you would shave about $70 billion off annual interest costs. Stretch that over a decade and you're saving, $700 billion. Even Van Eyck's Matthew wants to refinance $14 trillion in government IOUs the same way. Basically, shave some yield, sprinkle in digital gold, thank the taxpayer later. Right? Compared to that, XRP bond doesn't sound so out there, do they? All right, so let's eyeball what success might look like. Picture a debt ceiling fight for the future, right? Instead of C-SPAN panning across half-empty house chambers, you've got a live dashboard where citizens watch real-time buys and yields. Some grandma in, some part of the world checks her wallet and sees XRP bond coupon land precisely at noon, smiles and goes back to gardening. Right? Transparency solves half of the trust equation, right? Efficiency nails the rest. So the treasury slashes middleman fees, settles instantly, and auditors don't need 3-inch binders, right? Just a simple hash. Now it's story time. I remember clipping my first saving bond coupon with my dad. It felt ancient. Paper, micro print, this whole hold till maturity vibe that only made sense in black and white movie montages. Fast forward to me last week watching a Gen Z cousin tip a barista with Apple Pay and wondering if they're ever even handled a coin. Now, if bonds want to stay relevant to a generation raised on swipe left speed, turning them into tokenized mobile native assets could be the kind of glow up that they desperately need. Still, let's be honest. You can't duct tape volatility and call it stable, right? If XRP wants a seat at the bond table, it needs a dual token model, right? XRP as the performance token and an XRP pegged stablecoin for principal guarantees. Or perhaps the treasury itself provides a backstop, promising to redeem at face value in dollars if XRP tanked. Now, you might lose upside, but you do, of course, dodge a crypto winter, wiping out grandma's nest egg. The other really big speed bump is identity and compliance, right? Know your customer, KYC rules don't vanish in a puff of blockchain magic. They just upgrade, right? Every wallet buying an XRP bond still needs vetting, right? The trick is balancing privacy, one of crypto's original charms, with financial integrity. Maybe we can use zero-knowledge proofs. Now, I can't see who you are, but I know you're legit. That's like asking a bouncer to okay you without actually reading your ID. It's maybe sci-fi now, but mainstream tomorrow. And let's not forget liquidity, right? Today's treasury market is an absolute monster, moving trillions daily with the grace of a figure skater. So for an XRP bond to compete, secondary markets would have to have deep enough, or at least be deep enough, that a pension fund could offload $1 billion within, at least on a whim, without crashing prices dramatically. Right? Building that ecosystem means courting the BlackRocks and the Vanguards of the world, along with the Robin Hood crowd, and convincing both that this is a brave new bond, doesn't actually break when you poke it. And here's the cliffhanger that really keeps me up. What if the US passes on XRP, but a nimble emerging market nation grabs the idea first? Picture Brazil or Indonesia, launching a pilot, attracting yield hunters globally, and suddenly the Treasury's kind of brand new bond-fi looks like Blockbuster in a Netflix age. Now, disruption, it rarely asks for permission, right? It just shows up with a pizza because, well, pizza, and it takes a seat on the couch. But right now, tucked beneath all the what ifs, there's a signal cutting through the static. Governments are looking for cheaper, smarter ways to borrow. Now, tokenization, it isn't a fad. It's the natural next step in a world where we Venmo rent, we tap phones to ride the subway, and binge shows that buffer in 4K before we blink. Now, if money is already data, why shouldn't debt be, right? Now, Vandel's proposal is less about XRP specifically, and it's more about flipping the light switch on a new financial architecture. Now, if you're wondering where to track all of these kind of breadcrumb trails in real time, hop into our free crypto Discord server. There's a link chilling in the description down below. Now, we hash out these ideas daily pretty much, and tokenized treasuries to meme coins that moon and crash before brunch. It's kind of like coffee house chatter, but with candlesticks and GIFs. All right then, so it's the moment of truth. Imagine next year's State of the Union, right? The president steps up, nods to the nation's growing debt and says, we're launching digital treasury bonds on the XRP ledger. Markets freeze, commentators fumble, memes explode. Seconds later, blockchain explorers flash the very first transaction. Billions in XRP scooped up at auction. Gas fees barely the price of a candy bar. Grandma, gets a push notification. Congrats, you just funded a bridge. Here's your coupon. That would be the pivot point where centuries of paper finance slips into the cloud. Could it happen? Sure. Will it? Only if volatility subsides. Regulators sign off, liquidity thickens, and let's be blunt, confidence in the old system takes a dent. But history's full of moments when the never becomes the next quarter, right? Remember when emails were jokes about electronic mail, or when Netflix mailed DVDs. Innovation lurks in the ridiculous until, that moment, waiting for a perfect catalyst. And so, what do we do with this? First, stay curious. Watch how lawmakers kind of treat Bitcoin bonds, right? They're the canary in the crypto sovereign coal mine. Second, keep an eye on states experimenting with crypto reserves. Victories at the state level often snowball into fidelity, right? Third, follow XRP's legal battles, right? Clarity here unlocks doors absolutely everywhere else. And this is a really important one, keep asking human questions, right? Will everyday savers trust their retirement to a digital token, right? Trust is the currency beneath all others, right? If blockchain can make trust visible, timestamps, immutable records, public ledgers, then maybe that grandma, right, will actually trade her kind of shoebox of paper for a ledger entry in the cloud. Maybe we all will. Okay, deep breath. Right, we've roamed from Twitter threads to treasury pilots, from volatility headaches to liquidity daydreams. Right, we've peeked over the horizon at a world where your government bonds live on your phone, right? Updates in seconds and maybe earns you a yield in a coin that kind of started life as a fringe rebellion. Whether XRP actually breaks through or another token steals the spotlight, the bigger narrative is unstoppable. Finance is digitalizing at the speed of thought.